All right, man. We're gonna kick this thing off. So good. It's so good. Hey man, it's Tuesday. I remember Juvenile used to have this song on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You better watch for the streets, because them people gonna act ass if you get caught in the streets.
Tuesday.
Hey, yeah, man, that's old school stuff. Welcome back to what we call objectively aggressive, the Lighthouse series specifically. And of course, you know, I can introduce you all the time. I call you the good doc. I call you a lot of things, but I want you to introduce yourself, sir. How are you?
Oh man, I'm good, man. I am a student of life, investigator of knowledge, and
Sure.
ultimately to gather a better understanding, man. That's if I had to sum it up.
You know, I said it up. I was 19 saying some profound things, and I said the teacher is time. The teacher is time. And speaking of that, I'm gonna take some time. We're gonna take about 20 seconds here, Doc, to do some good sharing, if that's all right with you.
Yeah.
And we'll get it cracking. All right. So give us a second.
People always asking me. People always asking. All these damn people always people always ask. People always ask. All these damn questions. People always ask. All these damn questions. All these damn questions. People always ask. All these damn questions.
People always asking me all these damn questions, and they so confused. I don't know what to tell them. Why he do this? Why he do that? How you do this? How you do that? Hell yeah, I'm trying to do what I want, and I get good grades. That's why I wear these hats with A's. These people recognize that's why they stay up in my face. Cause
People always ask. All these damn questions. People always ask. All these damn questions.
they wanna know.
Okay. Mm. We'll do some more sharing and stuff later. I'm sure people will do some sharing for us. I hope, because it's that good of content. But you know what, Doc? On today's episode of the Lighthouse series, I want to talk about work, man. Everybody always talking about work. Oh my God. My sweet Saturday to work is something that we always talk about, is that work is the new slavery. And we talk neo-slavery. Now, I say this to not just talk negatively, because at the end of the day, I'm always going to have a 360 approach to what we talk about. So as we talk about work, you have to love what you do, because you're going to have to work your whole life. So as we work our whole lives, we should love what we do. But if we're not loving what we do and we're doing it for somebody else, sweet Saturday to work, neo slavery. You got it.
Well, I try to make sure that I don't use the word cavalier, because I do think that we've definitely created a situation where we have to differentiate what we know about a topic to what we're learning about a topic.
Okay.
And so I think historically, if you go back through history, with the exception of American and the transatlantic slave trade, we don't hear a lot of testimony of the people in other time periods who were enslaved, what they thought about the world.
Okay.
We don't know what they thought about it because no one ever told their story, or they couldn't read or write to tell their own story. So I make sure that when I differentiate between the idea of servitude that's involuntary for the purpose of to enrich someone else, because I think that's what it really boils down to, is that who is benefiting from the labor. And in the social structure, the person who tends to benefit from the labor is the person with the initial capital investment.
Okay.
So I
So
think that,
let's take a second, because there's a lot of things that we can talk about when you make that particular statement. But let's think about it as far as like a pimp and a prostitute.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because sometimes I come to find that, me and you, we'll be off in the atmosphere and we can live there, but I always want to keep it real.
Yeah.
And so we can talk about how there can be a manipulation of power to create work to make one feel like they're benefiting.
Yeah.
And they could be based on their situation. Now, let's not get it all the way twisted, but work in totality, if not done for the soul, could be done for somebody else, which could be considered some form of servitude.
Oh, yeah. But I think that the idea we're looking to now is compensation and then a social class or social strata that's created, for the purpose of demonizing those who are at the bottom. And so I think that you can have a social system that needs free labor, but then you also have to justify why these people aren't paid higher wages. A dime a dozen, which is like where I think that the labor movement is going towards automation. It's going to go towards artificial intelligence. It's going to be moving in that direction. So as it does that, you're going to see a lot of unskilled labor become, to use their words, obsolete. And once unskilled labor becomes obsolete, then the idea is how do you keep the masses from revolting and protesting? And so that's going to be, I think, the main concern moving forward.
Well, so when you say the masses, I feel like there needs to be a form of thought that the soft skills that are not needed in that particular low wage job is completely taken away by automation, right? And I mean, and when I'm saying the automation already has complete hard skills without emotion.
Yeah.
Right. And so soft skills on a factory line is not even needed.
Yeah.
And so it's almost to the point where we want automation because it feels like slave work, right?
Well, I mean, if you control capital, you want it, yeah. But I think that the idea is that if you have a population of people that you're not educating to do technically computer type jobs, or you're not preparing them for the 21st century economy, then I think that you're going to find out is that, for every percentage point the unemployment rate goes up, crime is directly correlated to it. So you're going to have this offsetting dynamic as you try to get a balance of what is the proper amount of automation. But what we'll see here, and this is the exploitative nature of it, is that capital wants labor to be as cheap as possible.
Well,
that's why the jobs went to overseas. China didn't make American companies go over there. Greed did.
Well, okay, so let's talk about this. Why was it so easy for American companies to take, sourcing or outsourcing over to those companies? Because at the end of the day, I'm going to speculate to say that it is hard to balance the American dream in America for so long, because that labor there is super cheap, and those people have been taught to just go to work and live their lives, go work, go come home, do what you need to do for the family, and repeat for how many ever years. Yeah. In America, the classism is too close to the lower class for them to just accept the fact that they're just going to go work.
Yeah.
And so if you see that, you say, hey, no. I want to go vacation. I want to live life and see America, by the fact that other countries don't give a damn about the secular, don't give a damn about certain things, are able to produce products so cheaply that people in America can order them on Amazon, lickety split, a million things and feel like that they're rich. But that's the facade, consumerism.
But then you have the redress of, the rise of the labor movement. the rise of unions, and people are coming in and saying, hey, look, we need a buffer between us and the unfeathered ambition of the capitalists, because if it wasn't for them, we still have child labor in this country. We would still have kids not going to school because it's more beneficial for them to go out in the field. So as we evolve there, is like now I'm having responsibility of, I need to now work with philanthropy. Like, oh, look, well, we shut down your job, but we put in this nice library in your community. You know what I mean? So I think that therein has always been a challenge of those who control capital to balance their greed for more with the societal interest as a whole, which is, I think, what the job of government was supposed to do. But then government came over and they got co-opted by the capitalists because they wanted to get reelected. So, I mean, it's a vicious cycle, to say the least.
It is, because, I was looking at some old literature I put together a couple of years ago talking about the structural frame and bureaucracy, and how bureaucracy is actually not a bad thing.
If you don't want change.
If you don't want change, because at some point in time, you have to have a balancing loop.
Yeah.
There has to be, okay, so this is the thought of the difference between contentment and complacency.
Yeah.
Right? Because at some point in time, your mission and vision statement have to come together where you have this euphoria of what the business looks like.
Yeah.
And so once you have it, you have to have bureaucracy to keep that no change method.
Yeah, but I think the problem we run into is that in order to get to the top of these systems, it's like, hey, let's just lock in everything the way it is, play the game the way it's playing, and not take into the equation that inequality over time charges interest. So the longer I don't keep capital moving, or the older I have had capital in the system, the more it will pay me. And so essentially it's like, hey, buy in to what we're trying to sell you, but we understand that there ain't enough seats at the top of the bureaucracy for you.
Okay. So if you take capitalism and you take government bureaucracy, which we have a government that, lobbyists, whatnot, they play they're feeding each other. It's a care feeding of each other, right? There is this thought that, okay, so I posted a video the other day about, how the conservative narrative is, the rhetoric is not only fallacious and secular, but gosh, I should pull that video up right now. But I say all that to say, in thought, is that there's a lot of things we can get caught up on, but when you're trying to balance capitalism and the government, and then you talk about things like the EPA, right? Like, I was watching this new show on Prime called Reacher, but Jack Reacher's been out there for a while, right? And it's a new one, and they're talking about pollutants of a town that you can't help but think about Flint and all these things, and it's just how a corporation can come to a town and sell them hope and then completely pollute the town. And then if there is any type of government oversight, they're paid off. And of course, in that particular series, killed. And it's like, how do you balance government and capitalism? And I know I said a lot.
Oh, yeah, but I think the goal of capitalism is not to balance itself. The goal of capitalism is to exploit labor at the cheapest rate you can get it, because I have to maximize profit. So outside of maximizing profit, I think the idea is it's easier to exploit labor than it is to not take care of, the people who have put the initial investment in. So I think that goes to a fundamental idea of how we conceptualize that fascism is when the government and the corporations become unified. It's when government interests and government policy and the special interests become one. They're fused together. And so now the government supports or backs up policies and things that are going to inhibit tax rates or inhibit accountability or stop unions from forming, things of that nature, a right to work. And see, I think when you tell somebody it's a right to work, it's like, well, is it a right to a fair wage? And so there's always been numbers, man. So the UN comes out with interesting numbers. They said when it costs 40% of your income to feed yourself, there will be social revolution. That's their number, 40%. So that's Arab Spring, that's history. So when you can't feed yourself with your money, with your paycheck, then the system don't work no more for the majority.
Okay. So here's a couple of things I'm gonna throw out. When you have a mentality that a dollar menu will feed you, we're not talking about that 40% anymore.
No.
Right?
No.
Right. And so the thing is, like, God, as we talk about it, the reason that I wanted to talk about this particular subject is working the new slavery, because think about what it actually does. Like, we're able to live in this world where we feel like we have things.
Yeah.
Because we work, we do this little time, you got Amazon, you got all these things that make you feel like you dope. But you gotta get your ass up and go right back to work the next day. And it's like it is a joke. And they play these commercials to make it even seem like it is okay. You remember what I said about the American dream? A nightmare is a dream too.
Oh yeah. But I think that if you look at the history of labor movement, even going back to England and any of these other countries, what you'll see is that there's always been this fight for more. That's what Das Kapital was. That's what Marx was saying. He was saying eventually the capitalist is going to eat itself. Because and I think that the critique that we have on it is not that the idea of, like, for example, we work more now in 2022 than they worked in the feudal days.
Correct.
We work more now. And I think as we work more now, because we've already been conditioned from school, from time you are 5 years old, let's go here and sit in this classroom for 8 hours so I can show you can work at this machine. So, but I think the ideas we're getting into is we don't have an alternative that we've seen work, because no matter what economic system that you have, there's still going to be greed there. You can be greedy socialist, you can be greedy capitalist. There's going to be greed.
When you put forth the hard work to what you do, you want to be compensated.
Yeah.
There's a form of compensation that needs to be there. And then we can even talk about the appreciation languages that spin off of work, spin off for work from the love languages. Like, we all want some form of appreciation. So I'm going to go out and say this. Confident opinion, because if we have switched to that, and my confident opinion can be anything that I say, but in this particular moment, I'm going to say that we live in a facade, because if you're not doing the work that you need to do to fulfill your soul and happen to be compensated for that, and you're able to use that to pour back in the community and to help facilitate your soul work, shit, you are doing slave work. Because trust and believe, at one point in time, I was doing soul work. And then, just like the good world, the good God, and the good life we live shows you that shit comes to an end and you gotta move on. And you're supposed to recognize that, because you have to move on. And so now I need to go do more soul work some other place, because if I don't, I'm now doing slave work.
Yeah, but and I think you raise up this idea that the people who come before us, their soul work was making enough money for their kids to survive. Their soul work wasn't about present day consumption. It was about withholding consumption so that my children could have a better future. And I think that so often we don't factor that into this idea of soul work, because I think it's become selfishness. It's become, how do I make the most of my condition so that I can leave an inheritance? Because leaving an inheritance for your children is important, because I think that the inheritance doesn't have to be money. It could be mentality. So I think you're talking about the Afro centric and the Eurocentric mind convergence. Is
Mm.
that this idea that I have a job for the whole, for the community, for the mission. So my job is to get the fish. I don't cook the fish, but in the sense of community. Whereas like in Africa, they don't have a term for jail. They don't have a word for prison because they found better ways to socially deal with people who are abhorrent to behavior. Because anything that I do to hurt the community or to hurt the collective becomes a problem for us all.
Mm.
And so when you have a shared idea, I don't want to steal from my neighbor because he got just what I got. We in this together. And so I think that's the difference between this working for yourself as opposed to working for community.
And it's all in the plan, man. I caught a video of Boosie. I can't remember what year it was, but it was talking about how all rappers and people get robbed in LA and they never talk about it. Right.
Yeah.
And so what makes me think about that story is that how riches and wealth are so juxtaposition and just parallel with the life of poverty in America. Like
Yeah.
a person can pull up in the most expensive car and maybe even throw a couple of dollars to somebody who's homeless. And I won't even speak. Unpopular opinion alert from a friend of mine. He says he doesn't understand how he sees white homeless people. He says he doesn't get it. He's like, how can you be white and homeless? Like, so much privilege out here in America.
Oh, but that's what I mean. And so on both of the margins, you're going to see extremes because I think that we have not associated this idea that you only get what you earn. Like that if you want the work, if you want the prize, you got to put the work in. And so I think this idea, and only so far as if I was a slave and I picked 200 pounds of cotton, and the next day I picked 300 pounds of cotton, I didn't see any increase in my labor for working harder. There wasn't any incentive to work harder. So why am I going to work harder if I know that if I pick anything under this amount, I'm going to be held liable. I might get lashes. So I'm going to pick my quota, what I know to do, and that's all I'm going to essentially arrive for. But I think that leaves us with a concern is that we want to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because I think the idea of exploitation, it only works so far as if we understand that the impact of that is we have to create ideas for those who don't work hard. We have to make sure that we have an ideology that fits our belief. It's not the capitalist system that's making them poverty. It is their own individual work ethic. I think that's the challenge.
All right. So what's the difference between work ethic now and about 30 years ago? Because now people don't want to work. And we see that there's an exploitation of capitalism and exploitation of labor and just a money hungry society to which everybody's talking about the bag. But now they switch the bag. The bag is the person. But now we're so confused, conflated about what happiness is. But people are so caught up on emotion. But you still gotta work. And you still gotta work. And work is all time related.
Well, being that I'm a retiree, I don't have to work, and I find that in the times when I did work, if I wanted to now, it would be because I enjoyed it. It's because something I wanted to do. But I would say I don't think it's that people don't want to work. It's that people don't want to get paid for their time like it's 30 years ago. Because inflation goes up every year, but we don't want to get paid. The minimum wage has been saying $7.25 since forever. And nobody's talking about this idea that jobs is paying $100,000 ain't in short supply.
And I say bruh with all due respect, Doc. Like, first of all, when we let me go on and tip my hat to you, because your service to this country, whatever it was, whatever the perception was, whatever you did, I'm sure it will never be a time that we could ever really put words to it, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
And so I thank you for your service. And with that, I understand the retirement piece because I'm trying to get there.
No,
But to understand that you sacrificed the possibility of dying, and you had to do it under law, and you got your education. There's so many things we can talk about what work was to you. But when it was time for you to punch, after about 20 years, you punched. And me and you had conversations about how it could feel slavish trying to leave.
Oh, bro. But I will tell you this, man. One of the things that I've learned is that you're not supposed to see the whole operation at work. See, if I'm a floor guy and I work in a factory, I'm not supposed to know what's going on in the office.
Right.
And see, the guy in the office job, his job ain't to know what's going on in the corporate. Okay. It's like you're supposed to stay in your lane. And once you start getting out of your lane, then you have problems of saying, wait a minute, I'm down here doing all the work. He just sit up in the office in the AC. He ain't doing nothing.
Right.
So you start to question this idea of what brings value. That's why COVID was so important, because throughout our history, one thing that slavery didn't do for our society is it did not challenge white people to grow. They were not challenged to become creative, to become more industrious, to go back to school or get educated. They didn't. So while they were not doing that, we were like, well, let's go get educated. And so now you have this dichotomy of people who got comfortable in their privilege to the point where I ain't worried about being the best applicant for this job because my dad said I'm gonna be the president when he died. You know what I mean?
Interesting. You know, I made a statement. You know, I've tried to align my strategic, rational thinking with my emotion to where if I say something emotionally, I ain't apologizing for shit because it was based in rationale.
Yeah.
And I make a lot of statements sometimes. You know what? I'm gonna hold that one. Yeah. And I'm gonna hold it. I'm gonna hold it for the simple fact that I can tell you that we live in a world where this world we live in was built on the back of people.
Yeah.
And now that it is not of a deliberate servitude society, it seems like shit can't actually get done anymore. Oh shit.
Well. So we saw this. We saw that once they broke the shackles from your hands, they still kept them on your mind.
So here's the thing that I love about our conversation, because we speak at our consciousness, which is the most important for us, but it's still applicable to outside consciousness, right? Yeah. So let's talk about the military real quick. You being a defender and me being, you know, a legal professional, and me being a former maintenance guy.
Yeah.
Okay. I left the maintenance career field because I felt like it was slave work. But I appreciated the trade craft that it taught me, and appreciating the hard work that it took to be a part of the operational Air Force.
Yeah.
To go into a different position, to appreciate the position that I was in and support that.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to be back there turning them wrenches, even though some days I wish I was out there turning them wrenches just to get re-energized and make sure, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so the only reason I bring that back up as far as classism, tribalism, is that inside of that world, if you work on the line versus working in the office, there's a difference.
Oh yeah, and then I think you start to look at how powerful it is to do something under a banner. So, you know, it ain't necessarily what I do, it's what the perception is that I'm doing. Like no matter what base you go to, they're gonna think that they got the most important mission in the Air Force. You know,
If you ain't maintenance, you ain't.
Yeah, because we're going to internalize what we are doing for value. Because
Right.
some people, they can go home from work and say, you know what, I took 8 boxes and I took those 8 boxes over there and I put them over here, and now I can go home with a sense of accomplishment. But if you're in a job where the only accomplishment you're going to get is that no bad guys blew up the plane, how do I measure that over time? How do I measure that? What's fulfilling or satisfying me in this work is that I'm telling myself that, well, the bad guys ain't coming because I'm here. You know, and so we develop things to create meaning, which I think is important, because if you don't have something, then somebody will get one for you. What is your mission statement? You know, what is your purpose? What's your post briefing? You know, and people will not get you to a point where you're getting buy-in, because you're seeing that eventually over time we're going to have to promote you. We understand that you cannot psychologically do the same job for year on end without being disgruntled and frustrated. We're going to give you new responsibilities, new chores, and therefore we can keep you active or engaging in the process. So now we have a staff meeting, and let's see what you think. Let me get your buy-in.
Please.
Well, no, but you know,
we're really looking for buy-in in a staff meeting.
Well, no, but I'm talking about the ability for people to speak or look to you as that subject matter expert.
Oh, you would hope so, but they will only look to it as the subject matter expert for the direct result.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Yeah.
Nothing else. And so at the end of the day, I'm gonna tell you what I learned from the military. Calculate explanation time, Doc. We can complain all we want, but we sign up for whatever we want to do in life.
Yeah.
If you decide to be in the military like you and I did, do 20 years, do whatever years, you can retire. One of the only career fields, or we'll say professions, that you can still get a pension. And now they're not even doing it the same. So we got lucky, right? Yeah. So now we're able to do it. But it makes us be at an age of 40 something and look back and be like, this work shit is for the birds.
Yeah.
Let me tell you why. Because we simultaneously put our life on the line, sacrifice all our time, family, body, health, indoctrination. But if we were paying attention, discipline.
Yeah.
Build and destroy. Interpersonal communications.
Oh yeah, and seeing how organizations are supposed to work.
That's
seeing how to compartmentalize data, how to not let the left hand and the right hand don't know each other are doing, but they're working toward the goal. But I think for me, I think the only really analogy I got is like, you know, if you've been in prison for 20 years and they let you out for prison and they don't teach you how to be around the regular civilian folks, it can cause problems, because you get so indoctrinated into what is my mission for today? What is my objective? You become so task oriented, you don't even realize that the task is just to be okay. You know, I got to put that on the list. Be okay today. You know what I mean? So we don't get into that, you know, of how to really quantify the impact that it has when you've been in environments where you know where you stand. You know that if I got more of these on my arm than you, I can tell you what to do, or I should be knowledgeable. If I got less, I need to listen to you. And so you grow up in that mentality and you get freed from it. And then it's like, well, who knows what? I don't know. Where your stripes at?
Hey, but sometimes if you're paying attention, you'll recognize that the stripes is in the total person.
Yeah.
It's a total person effort in understanding what the stripes are once you remove yourself from it. But if you never had access to understanding what that looks like, well, you don't know. But that's why it's important for people in the military to stay invested in the civilian community.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there can be a detachment, especially the higher up you get and the more power you get inside the institution, where you feel like you're a god inside the institution.
Yeah.
And I've always challenged them. I've said, you know what? Badasses. I'll give you that. Dropped them in the middle of the baddest city we know with no phone.
Yeah, but they
Bring them back.
understood. They understood organization. I mean, they understood that if you're not organized, you fight with logistics. You have the S functions. You have to have code. And so I think what the military does is it gives you code. It gives you certain principles to live by. And I think that when you start to operate in certain environments, you understand like, well, if I'm in Iraq, I got to carry a gun no matter where I go because everything could be a threat. So what do you do is that how do you separate yourself from this ideology, from this indoctrination? And I think that becomes a challenge because for me, I spent 15 of my 22 years overseas. So I wasn't really in America knowing what was going on. I was kind of like out there. I'm trying to learn about the culture of this new country I'm in.
But so let's take a second right now to acknowledge the fact that security forces, defenders, have more training as police than regular police.
Yeah, but I think that the concern is that we have a homogenous population. And so
I understand that.
Yeah, but I mean
the deliberate training.
Yeah. Yeah, but
the deliberate training of security forces members, even though it's for force protection for all, it affects the homogenous population to give a euphoric sense of existence on a base. Even though, hey, slow down, you're going too fast. But besides that, you don't see a lot of craziness.
Well, because I mean, we have a pretty good screen population also as well. They're screening a lot of people that would not be good for service before they even get there. From a lot of those barriers that
you. Are you talking about security forces members?
No, I'm talking about that the military screens people.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of the times I think that you're getting information about how to do something, but at the same time you're focusing on how am I perceiving this as opposed to what's going on. And the perception is that this dude is only a UCMJ thug. He only talk tough because he got that rank. But we know it.
Hey, listen, the same thing can be said for money in certain situations. You know what I mean? But it's a microcosm of what we experience. But I think it's dope and sad at the same time because I think because we defend democracy so much that we as military members think we have certain rights that we don't, because at the end of the day, and it really just hit me recently, like they will send the people for us if we don't show up.
Oh yeah, because you got see, and I think most people have never really studied like life on a plantation.
Ooh,
like the day-to-day life of a
can't stand when you hit that shit late like that. You be hit that. Go ahead.
I'm talking about like the psychology of how it operated and what kept order there. And so
speak to it.
And so the same thing happens a lot of times in the military. You have to get your peers to stop. So you're picking a dorm leader or a dorm chief who's the oldest person there, not because they're smarter, because they presuppose that the oldest person there is going to have some more savvy to deal with people. I've lived longer. So regardless of where you come from, white or black, the oldest person going to be in charge until he messes up, put the next dude up. And then eventually we're going to see the competent dude, regardless of how old he is, should be in charge because he's competent. He understands people skills. He's going to be responsive. He's not going to rock the boat. We can trust him when we turn our back. These are the people that you start to see in the plantation that start to rise through the ranks. The people who ain't going to buck the system. The ones who are going to say, yes, sir, salute smartly, and press on. And the reason that's so important is because when you start to talk about the plantation life, what you have to remember is that it was inculcated in us by the people who were designed to give us authority. not from the slave master. The slave master didn't make you a slave. It was your parents' job. It was their responsibility so that you grew up and was successful on that plantation, giving you your roles and your missions.
Let me
And
give
we
you
do the
something.
same, and we do
Can I
the
give you
same
something?
stuff. Huh?
Can I give you something?
Yeah.
The enlisted part is truly the house.
Well, and so, but you got to also remember that everybody in the house were not in the house because they wanted to be.
Oh no, I get that, but
You know, but it was because you remember there were black slave catchers, and they were actually some of the best.
Well, okay, so you say that they were the best because they understood the mentality.
Yes.
And so that's the sneakiest thing. And so as we hit the 40-minute mark, we're gonna keep it 45. You know, I never went OSI. I never went OSI when I went legal because I was not going that far because I understood the mentality and I said, nope, not doing it. I'm not going to use my mentality to catch up my people because I'm not trying to get paid for that.
Yeah.
You know? And so, gosh, money tip, book tip. You want to know what's fun about this now? Not being prepared for it. At this point in time, I feel like when it comes to money and book tips, we've read enough books, done enough money things where the money tip is not specific, or the book is specific, but it can just be random to whatever. But I'm thinking about a book right now. I got some kinfolk. Angelo Edwards. He wrote a book on cryptology, stocks. What is your book? You know what? We're gonna find this. I'm gonna tag him in this video.
Edwards.
Angelo Edwards, yeah, man. That's fam. He a contractor doing it big. It's in my bag. I'm sure. No, yo, check it. Peep game. Not only a money tip, not only a book tip, but just a life tip. When you're at work, create what I like to call a shit kit. So when you have a shit kit, right, you have everything you need to go to the bathroom, you know, wipes, book, spray, whatever, right? Angelo's books in my shit kit. And that's an important place in my building because we can't have phones. So being on the, you know, and so I'm gonna find this book by Angelo. But until then, go ahead, Doc.
No, man, I will tell you, man. One of the things I will say is that there's a ratio of how much money specific black people spend on entertainment than they spend on education, and it's about 200 to 1. For every $200 we spend on entertainment, we spend $1 on education or making ourselves better.
Say that again. What?
It's the entertainment to education ratio.
Wow.
So you essentially want a ratio where you are investing your time, your energy into making yourself better. You're investing in yourself knowledge-wise, either going buying a book, taking a class. So for every $200 that we spend on entertainment, we spend $1 on education. So if I spend $1,000 on entertainment, that equals $5 for me. And I think when you start to look at how that ratio is inversed, I would say the money tip is to make sure you are investing in you and not just to be entertained, because that will definitely pay off some very serious dividends. You know, one thing I've been reading lately, you know, I read this book, and I say this because when I read this book, I find that a lot of the things that were done the reason or rationale of why a lot of things were done to us are still done now. They just have to be called something different.
Okay.
Same intent. And I like to be able to go to the origin of when things started so that I can understand the psychology of what keeps it in place now. And that's why I like this book, because it's definitely been an eye opener when it comes to cultural things.
Well, we always should keep our eye open, man. And I appreciate everything that you share with us. And I appreciate the dedication to you coming on this particular platform with me. That means a lot. So I'm going to give you my words of affirmation to say that I salute you for all the good insight and information that you give us. I'm going to share this book here, The Missing School Subjects, from
Okay.
my kinfolk here, Angelo Edwards, who wrote this book. It's got published, and it's in my shit kit, which means it's important. And it talks about the missing school subject, about financial literacy.
Mm.
And so it's a smart man out here, family doing contract work, who is just trying to get back to the community. And I'm gonna tag him in this particular post and stuff, so make sure I'm showing him love. And with all that, I'm gonna move to the final thought. Doc, final thoughts on working and slave stuff.
Well, I think that we definitely have to make sure we see parallels historically, so that we don't find ourselves. And what I see happening most instances is history is repeating itself, but those who don't know that it is don't see how it parallels. So they're not identifying the repetition until it's too late. They're seeing it's repeating, but they don't understand how it flashes, how it can go from 0 to bad very fast. Because I do think we have the normalcy bias, and I think that when it comes to working in a culture where we were once labor or free labor, I think it's easy to see parallels in things that others may miss. That others may miss. They may miss this idea because it never happened to you. There's no history of it happening to you here anyway. And so since there's no history of it, it seems radical. But for some, it doesn't seem as radical because we understand what this history is. We're not under any illusions that laborers can be exploited very easily. And if I live in a system where I can just print the money and I can pay you for the labor, what is it costing me?
Oh,
what is it costing me?
Whoa, you just said something there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so my final thought: you're gonna have to work anyway. So as you work, find what you love about your work and make it better. Because at the end of the day, your work is being capitalized by somebody, regardless of your empathy or apathy, regardless of your effort or lack thereof.
Yeah.
So you got to live, you got to survive, you got to thrive. You got to take steps for every single part of it. So the first thing to do is understand that you're going to have to work. So find what you love and what you do right now, and then start finding what you love in general and start moving your life towards that work. Because at the end of the day, if you don't move towards your soul work, then you will always be a slave. That's what I'm gonna say. And with that,
they wanna know just where I stay. They wanna know who the fuck is KJ. Yeah, it's me in the flesh. I'm not gonna say I'm the best.
Sir.
We out here, man.
Yes, sir. We'll talk.
Stay on for me.
All right.
Hey, yo, we out here on Objectively Aggressive. No pressure. just perspective, always aggressive, all love. Peace.